Hi, everyone, and welcome to ZAA's Professional Development Webinar Series. My name is Tatiana Jordan, and I'm the Communication and Membership Coordinator with ZAA. For those of you joining us for the first time, ZAA is a Zoological Association of America. We are a nonprofit, member-based accrediting organization dedicated to responsible wildlife management, conservation, and education. ZAA upholds the highest level of professional standards in animal welfare, safety, and ethics. ZAA advocates by proactively supporting our members, animals, visitors, and industry. ZAA educates by providing professional development to our community and beyond. And ZAA conserves by promoting conservation efforts and awareness of all wild things. Some upcoming webinars: on the 11th, we have American Association of Zookeepers, Conservation Initiatives, and how you can be involved. And on the 18th, we have Animal Management Programs, or AMPs, what they are and why they work. Again, all of our webinars are Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. If you would like to access all of our ZAA webinars, you can join us today at zooassociation.org, or you can go ahead and scan the QR code here. Just some reminders: the audience will remain muted at all times. If you have, there will be a Q&A session at the end of a presentation. You can go ahead and type your questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. If there is a question that you like, you can give it a thumbs up, and it will boost it to the top of the list and make it more likely to be asked. Again, all previously recorded webinars are available on the members only page at zooassociation.org. And if you would like a certificate of participation, you can go ahead and email me at membership@zooassociation.org. So tonight we have the Nexus Zoos and Aquariums, connecting Ex-Situ and conservation with In-Situ conservation. We have Dr. Kelly George, the Executive Director of ZAA, joining us tonight. Kelly, if you'd like to take it over from here.
Sure, I can do that. And welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining. Always thrilled when I get to present. I don't always get to present, so I was very excited when I was actually invited to do so. So, so I wanted to just kind of start off by saying originally my title was Zookeepers, Boots on the Ground Wildlife Conservationists, which I still think is a valid title for this presentation, but I did change the title up on Tatiana, and she just found that out. So sorry about that. But I wanted to instead think about zoos and aquariums as this nexus, right? The connecting piece between Ex-Situ and In-Situ conservation. And the pictures here are actually of my grandsons. So anytime I get to promote my grandsons, I do, because I love them to death. But they were actually on a trip with their parents, and they went to a zoo. Unfortunately, I don't remember the name of the zoo, so I apologize for that. And these were the pictures that they sent to me, and were so excited about being able to go into this aviary and talk and learn about the birds and actually have the birds sit on them. You can see how excited they are. And I really just wanted to give a shout out to anybody who works with the public in trying to, again, engage them in this idea of conservation and get them into this conservation minded thought process. We really do need to start with the young. And so I was really excited to see that my grandsons, even though they get a lot of it through me because they have to listen to grandma, but really for them to have these kinds of experiences, especially without me, it is pretty exciting. So that's what led me to thinking about this idea of the nexus, and thinking about how zoos and aquariums fit that space. And so hence why I think the topic is important for a webinar. A lot of the things that we're going to be talking about today, come from personal experience or from other people's experiences. And so, it might be in some cases maybe stating the obvious a little bit, but I think it's always good for us to repeat, these ideas and these thoughts, so that they become more of not more of a skill. That's a learned skill that your kind of your body and your language just automatically respond with, right? It's like practicing for anything else. If you want to be a pro volleyball player, you have to start practicing, right? And then your body just kind of takes on the ability to do those movements. It's kind of the same idea in whatever we do. We have to practice to become better at it, to be more comfortable at it, to be able to uh, really understand where we are and where we stand in certain ideas, and so anyways, so that's kind of why I thought this webinar was important for us to produce. So I want to start by just giving you a little personal narrative here. And for those of you that know me, please excuse the fact that you have to hear my personal narrative again. But I think it's always important to really think about where we all started, right? So I'm much older than probably a lot of people that are listening or will be listening to this webinar. Um, and so when I think about that pivotal moment in my life, where I knew that I wanted to do something with animals, and I knew I wanted to do something with understanding how people relate to and interact with animals. I always come back to this point, and this is marine land of Florida. This is an archive photo that I was able to pull from the internet. Um, and this is really kind of the starting point for me, in the sense that I was probably, if I had to guess, 11, 12, maybe at the most. And I was visiting marine land of Florida with my parents. It was early 70s. And so we were basically, allowed to do pretty much what we want in the 70s. There weren't a lot of rules in the 70s, for those of you that experienced the 70s. So after we had, visited Marineland show, and it was the dolphin show, obviously, um, my dad and I decided we were going to walk back into the space where the large pool was, where the dolphins had just had their show. There were no trainers around. There was no security at that time. Obviously, this would not be the case today. So we were able to walk back into the arena area, and there were dolphins that were still in the pool. Um, and uh, there was also a ball, so enrichment, right? That was in the pool as well. And my dad and I walked up to the pool wall, and a dolphin threw a ball up to me. And it was the most bizarre thing. And of course, I was young, so it was fun because I got all wet and, everything that people love about those kinds of interactions. But I threw the ball back, and then it threw it back, and then I threw it back. And my dad and I stood there a good 10 minutes. We're both drenched. We had the best experience with this dolphin, who then decided they were done and they stopped throwing the ball back up, and we left that moment. And of course, my mom is wondering what the heck we were doing, and then we come back all wet and just couldn't even stand to explain what had just happened. That moment is really what changed my direction, because it made me start to think about, why is it that that dolphin wanted to play, right? And not only why did it want to play, but why was it willing to play with me? And why was I willing to play with it? It certainly didn't look like me or sound like me, or we weren't even sharing the same space. It was in the pool. I was out of the pool, So all of these kinds of questions kind of resonated with me, and made me really start to question all of those things. And so I bring that story up a lot. So again, I apologize if you've heard it before, but it's really because I want to express that zoos and aquariums can really change lives. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my future. I was a kid, right? I still didn't know as I became an adult or a young adult. But I knew I wanted to do something like this, something in working with zoo animals in particular. Um, Developed a passion in me, and something that I really wanted to explore, which I did as a career path, hence where I am today. Um, So I want to bring this up to talk about the fact that that experience that I just described obviously was between me and an animal. There was no trainer or keeper that was present. But that's not usually the case, right? And especially not today. So we have to think about how we, as the people that are working with our animals in our zoos and aquariums, how we are kind of the co-stars. I'm not suggesting that we become the the focus, right? The focus is the animals. People don't come to a zoo and aquarium to see you. I'm sorry. I hate to tell you that, but that's really the truth. But they do come to see the animals, and then they come to understand the animals through through you, right? So you become the co-stars, if you will, and you become then the voice of the animals in your care. You are then responsible for telling their stories. You know your animals better than anyone. And if you don't, by golly, you better be out there understanding your animals. And that means spending some time with the individual animals, but also understanding a bit about the natural history of the species. And leave that last bullet point for a moment here because I want to really expand on that one. So let's go back and think about this. So if you are the voice for the animals in your care, what does that mean? Right? That doesn't mean to be anthropomorphic and, start saying, oh, the bear is saying blah, blah, blah. That is not what I mean by being the voice for your animals. What I mean by being the voice for your animals is just that being able to talk about the plight of the animals, the plight of their species, why we have these animals in our care. Sometimes, especially when it comes to bears here in the U.S., most of the times, because of them being a native species, then it's because they have had something happen to them in their life. We don't breed them, right, in zoos and aquariums because of the species, but we do accept a lot of them from our Fish and Wildlife Services who need help in providing a life for these animals because of whatever the case might be that they have experienced. So we need to become the voice so that people understand their story. We need to, again, be responsible for that. We need to be accountable for the way that we present their story. We need to think about the fact that we want people to connect to those specific animals and to understand that they have had a transition in their life from where they maybe started to where they are today in the zoo. And so, again, we need to be able to describe that and describe that in a way that people can relate to and that people can understand. Telling fun facts about the animals, leave that as the low hanging fruit. This is my recommendation. Leave that as the low hanging fruit for people to ask about, when you're having a chat or a talk or whatever you might be calling them in your zoo and aquarium. Um, Talk more about the actual animal, right? The animal that they are in presence of. I think that goes a long ways in telling, actually being the voice of the animal and taking responsibility for telling their stories. Of course, that can work with non-native species as well, right? Understanding the plight of the species, understanding maybe that this animal was born in captivity. However, um, represents a species that is in need of awareness, right? Is in need of recognition, is in need of maybe even help. So I think when we think of ourselves as kind of the co-stars, we recognize that the stars of the show are the animals that people have come to see, right? But that we can really be that supporting actor, if you will, to help the animals tell their own story. And so I think that's really important for us to think about as we work with these animals and as we think about how we can connect people better with our animals. And I say there at the end, that last bullet point, you and your animals can do a lot together. Okay. So again, it shouldn't just be you, it shouldn't just be the animals, but maybe what can you do? What can you accomplish as a team, right? What can you accomplish as co stars? And so one of the things I'd like for you to think about is how do you create curiosity? So again, this is a picture of one of my grandsons. But I loved this picture because he was just this I was with him on this picture. This is my picture. He was just thrilled with seeing this eel pop out of this pipe. Okay. So I want to just express when I say create curiosity, we can think about this from two different angles. We can think about creating curiosity, certainly for our guests, and thinking about how do we, kind of establish the moment that might happen, might not always happen. The eel might not always pop out at the time that somebody is standing there, right? But um, how can we create the potential for those kinds of moments, which then, creates the curiosity of the individual that's looking. So when the eel then popped back in to the tube, what do you think that my grandson did? He did what everybody does, including myself who was there. He started to look down into the tube, right? You're curious. Where did he go? What is he doing? What does he look like when he's down in there? You start asking questions about, why did he pop out? Why did he go back? All of these things start to kind of, I don't know, roll around in your head. Um, and so I think by creating these moments, these potential moments in your design of your spaces is something that we can do to help our animals create that story, right? To create curiosity about them. The other thing that I think we need to consider is not only are we doing this creation of a space to promote curiosity of the person, but think about the ability to also create the curiosity of the animal or for the animal, right? The animal has the the option here to become curious, right? To kind of poke its head out and see what's happening beyond its tube or beyond the space. It also, if you think about exhibit design and thinking about mental stimulation for the animals, having the ability for the animal to explore a space or to be able to even themselves create their own curious moments, right, for the animal creating that curious moment, rather that be, poking out of a hide like this, rather that be being able to look behind, pull a curtain, rather that be, depending on the species and what is safe for them, obviously. But creating those little moments that establish something new and exciting and curious for our animals, as well as new and exciting and curious for our guests. That's one of the things that we can accomplish together is to create curiosity. Another thing that we can think about is how do we create empathy? Right. So I want to highlight a project that is going on at the Dakota Zoo, and I have their permission to do this in North Dakota. This is a project that they've been working on for a couple of years now in thinking about how to create empathy. And again, it's more about engaging the person or their guest in the moment, right? Engaging them in the moment with that particular individual animal. And so they've created this trading card system, which, this is not earth shattering. It's not something that has never been heard of before, right? To have trading cards. We know trading cards exist. We know that they exist in in different games and different things that become really popular. Um, so the Dakota Zoo decided to try to take that thought and put it into a trading card system for animals that they have encounters with or the potential for encounters with. And so they've created a whole series at this point of trading cards. And what you can see there on oh, I'm sorry, didn't mean to go forward. Um, what you can see here on these first two, you see the front is the picture. It's the actual picture of the actual animal, right? Their animal, not just a generic a river otter, but this is Sudali. And this is Sudali's story on the back of the card. And then there's this QR code. And what this QR code does is allow you to quickly go to their website. And at their website, you can learn more about their species. You can learn more about North American river otters, but you can also actually offer your assistance in helping with the conservation of the river otter or other animals that they participate in conservation, which I think is kind of cool. They're able to track it and they're able to um, figure out if their trading cards are making a difference, if it's creating the empathy that they think it is, to drive people to first learn more information and then possibly a behavioral something they can measure as far as a behavior of conservation to actually donate. And we did the same. Dakota Zoo did the same with, again, multiple species. This is George, one of their black-footed or African penguins. And again, George's story is on the back, and same idea, right? And then they have even special cards for special days. So on World Penguin Day, they don't necessarily talk just about George, but they do, again, have a special card. You can see it has like a silver star around it as the border. And that means that is offering some more information about penguins because it's World Penguin Day. So the idea is to connect your guests to individual animals and to kind of allow that personal impression of the species to to resonate, right? To allow that interaction, that specific interaction, to resonate. And then, again, we often say that our ambassador animals are for our, excuse me, that our animals are ambassadors for their wild counterparts. So this connection, the idea of this connection is to transcend individuals that we meet to thinking about the bigger picture, right? To creating the empathy of the species itself. So if we're going to have animals as our ambassadors, then we need to make sure that we're establishing that relationship between who we can see as a guest. We can see George, we can see Sudali. We might not be able to see their wild counterparts, but we can see them and we can learn about them and we can learn about their lives and we can learn then about others within their same species. So again, creating empathy, I think, is really important, and we can do it in lots of different ways. This is just one example, but again, working as a team, working as co-actors, right? We have the animals and then ourselves. We can really try to create some pretty special um, uh, uh, areas of empathy. And then the third thing I wanted to just talk about is how do we do this as co-actors is creating memories, right? So something I think that sometimes we take for granted, but we need to be careful that we don't forget that we're really blessed to work with these animals. We work with them daily, and not everyone gets to do that. Most people will not even see these animals ever in their lifetime unless they get the privilege to come to a zoo or an aquarium. And so that means we need to make sure that we're making every interaction memorable, right? And so if we think about, what can we do to make that interaction between the animal and the person more meaningful, more memorable? What can we do as the co-actor, right? So we can do things like simple things, offer to take the picture, right? Offer on their phone, offer to give them a little secret about that particular animal, something that specifically about that individual animal. Because again, who knows those animals better than you? Nobody. Nobody should. You should be the one that knows your animals, right? So, what can you tell them that gives them something, just a little nugget that, again, builds that empathy, builds that connection, builds that memory with that specific animal? Um, it's really how memories are created, right? And then what do they do with that memory? They go home and they talk about it. They talk about it with others. They talk about the experience that they had. You certainly want to make sure that they're walking away with a positive experience. We want to make sure that they see the animal is having a positive experience as well. So again, we don't push an animal to do anything that it's not wanting to to do as far as an interaction goes, because we want um, that positive memory, right? That's what we want to leave in somebody's with someone, right? Because that's what they're going to talk about. Same way, the reason that I still talk about my marine land experience, right? We want to create that memory. We want to help create that memory. The animal is going to do most of the work, right? You're there as the co-worker or the co-star to really just try to facilitate the ability to create this positive memory. So that's what I think we can do as a team. And again, I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know, but I think that these are important points that we need to remember. And um, so now what I want to do is kind of switch gears a little bit and think about this idea of Ex-Situ, In-Situ conservation. And I find this very fascinating because really, if I think about this, what I understand is that most people who work in a zoo don't think of themselves as working in wildlife conservation. I get that asked a lot by especially young keepers who will say, "Well, I really want to work in wildlife conservation, so I'm starting here working at a zoo." And I always like scratch my head thinking, well, what do you think you're working in? Because we do work in wildlife conservation when we work in a zoo or an aquarium. And so again, the importance for this topic is for us to think about this. Okay, what are the connections between what we do in ex-situ conservation and what we can see as similarities in in-situ conservation? So I pulled again from Google Images a picture of Columbus Zoo and Aquariums lion habitat, which you see there on the right. And then I have a picture of um, what would be an Ex-Situ setting on the left. I'll come back to both of those in just a second, but I just wanted to at least lay out where we're going with this slide. Okay. So I think it's important again for us to think about these similarities and to help our guests even better understand the similarities between zoo habitats and the natural habitat. And I think we can make those connections and really drive support for what we do as part of our wildlife conservation efforts. So if we think about fragmented populations, so we all know that wild populations have become fragmented. That's not new news. And in some ways, we can really think about zoo populations as fragmented, that is, that they require the same type of management for biodiversity, right? So that's one connection that I think even sometimes people within our industry don't always make, is that, you know, the populations, the wild populations are actually fairly closely monitored. And we do a lot of things in the name of biodiversity to try to make sure that populations don't become so inbred that there are issues. Okay. And again, I'll talk about some of those here in a moment. But just remember that when we're thinking about the idea of fragmented populations, we manage our populations in the zoo and aquarium world very closely, very intensely. But it's not really that far from what we see happening in natural spaces, because natural habitats, because again, those populations are becoming quite fragmented. And we're finding ourselves needing to do more and more intensive management for biodiversity. We can also think about how habitats are managed, right? We all know that there are very few natural habitats left in the world that are not managed in some way to assure proper opportunities for the animals. Um, we do the same within our spaces, right? We manage for the animals in our care. We manage the space to protect it from drought. So we might have to actually water grass, right? We manage the space to protect it from fire. We have ways to make sure that the animals are safe if there is, Lord forbid, a fire or any other kind of natural disaster. We manage our habitats to protect it from disease. right? To make sure that the soil quality is of um, where it needs to be, to make sure that there's nothing in the grass or the soil or anything that could potentially harm our animals, right? And to try to protect the animals from disease as best to our abilities. We see the same thing happening again in our wild habitats, right? They're all being managed. There are very few places that I would argue aren't managed to some degree, but they're being managed even more and more intensely. Um, Partially because, again, it's a set space. We don't have animals roaming freely anymore, especially in places like Africa, where we used to see animals roam for pretty much a big piece of the continent. Now we find corridors, but those corridors are very protected and really trying to help connect some of these fragmented populations, fragmented habitats. And so therefore these areas are very highly managed at this point. Okay, so again, similar to what we do. Um, we can also think about visitor engagement. And that's why I wanted to bring up these two pictures. We often romanticize that wild habitats are devoid of human, non-human animal encounters. And it's really quite the contrary that exists. These pictures, again, are meant to kind of demonstrate that. You can see that both are in pretty close proximity to the lions. And in many ways, the lions can behave similarly in the sense that, if these lions in this left picture were bothered by the fact that um, that vehicle is sitting there. Probably those people are talking. They're not yelling or anything. You can see that the tracker on the front of the vehicle. I have no tie to this, anyways. By the way, I just pulled this from a Google image, but you can see there that the tracker on the front of the vehicle is quite relaxed, looking at these lions. Right, so the lions are quite relaxed. The people are quite relaxed. Everybody's just kind of enjoying the moment. Um, and if the animals wanted to, they could stand up and walk away. Okay. They would walk away, and more than likely, the vehicle would follow them to at least a certain distance. They would give them their space. They don't want the animal to become agitated that they're there because obviously this is an open vehicle and that could be dangerous. So they're certainly making sure that the animals are going to have their space, but the lions could easily stand up and walk away. And so I want to just make that connection to the habitat that we see at the Columbus Zoo. Again, this is an image that I pulled, a public image that I pulled, and you can see there that the lions are pretty close in proximity to where the guests are located, and that they are choosing to stay there. They seem relaxed. The male lion seems to be sleeping, which of course we know lions do most of the day, is just lay around and sleep. And so again, they could get up and walk away. That habitat is actually quite spacious. They could get up and walk to the back of the habitat if they wanted to. They're choosing to stay up there. The lionesses are in the shade. Um, and it gives the visitors an opportunity to see them up close and personal. So again, it's pretty similar, huh? This idea of visitor engagement. And I again think that we forget that, and we forget sometimes to help our visitors to understand that our animals are are comfortable, they're habituated, right, to these types of encounters, the same as those lions that have the vehicle near them. And then we can, of course, think about animal welfare. Animal welfare is at the core of all concern for animals, regardless of their setting. This is why facilities spend so much time and effort trying to train individuals in how to assess an animal in their care. And it's really not that far from what we do in field work to assess a population and to think about the welfare of the animals. Same principles hold. What is the environment like for the animal? How is the animal behaving in encounters with people, with conspecifics, with the environment? What's the health of the animal? Um, from I'm going through the 5 domains if you haven't figured that out yet, right? What's the nutrition? We can see obviously the nutrition in the managed care system, but we can also see what the animals are eating if we are watching an animal or animals for any time period. We're obviously going to see what they eat and drink. So same principles, right, go across both types of animals. So animal welfare is certainly at the core of both. And so those are very big similarities. And I also want to bring this up, this idea of training, because we do spend a lot of time in our facilities working with our animals and training them for multiple reasons. But some of those reasons include preparing them for transport. So is this also done in natural habitats or wild spaces? You might think, well, how is that similar? Well, let me show you this little video. So I'm going to talk over this. You'll hear the dogs kind of yipping in the background here, and you'll see that there's a vehicle that just pulled up. So now I'm not a trainer. As a matter of fact, I'm a terrible trainer. I have no patience, so that's why. However, I do work with some pretty amazing trainers, including this colleague of mine in South Africa that's working with this pack of wild dogs. And what he's trying to do is to train them um, for basically a recall. Okay, what we would call a recall. And you'll see there, he just threw out a live or not alive, excuse me. He just threw out a full carcass. So one of the dogs is collared, and basically what they do is use telemetry to narrow down at least the location of the pack. And then they use a sound, which they use as the cue for the call to call the dogs. And then they offer positive reinforcement. Um, Now, obviously, you'll notice that's their reinforcer is a bit different than what we would offer, right? Given that it was a full carcass. But what you'll see here is you saw the animals coming. You saw the alpha readied on the road, right? You saw that the vehicle then pulled away. When the vehicle pulled away, again, another idea that the animals know that it's safe to approach. I'm in the vehicle that's moving now, okay? But basically, it's the same basic principles, right, for training. The idea of why they are training this pack of wild dogs is to hopefully be able to monitor the pack better, number one, because this is one of two packs in this particular park. And what they have to be very careful about is when the pack starts to splinter off, right? As they have offspring, if you know anything about wild dogs, they will actually have splinter packs of male and females that will splinter off of the main pack. And the idea is that those splinter packs, need to meet new opposite gender packs of animals that have come off of different packs, right? And that's how nature creates the biodiversity. When we are in these fragmented populations in these managed spaces, we don't always have the ability for those splinter packs to find each other. So in this, again, very managed system for biodiversity, one of the things that we try to do is we oftentimes need to relocate some of those splinter packs. So the idea of this was to figure out if there was a way that we could mitigate some of the concern and some of the stress of actually relocation, of actually, tracking them down and darting them and so forth, and to find out if there is a way to, through training, get them to eventually go into, a travel cage so that we could then relocate the animals into their new environment and again increase the biodiversity of the packs and hopefully the success of the packs. So what you can see and what you can understand is that just like in our settings in the zoo and aquarium world, we are not training just for the animals to do, tricks, right? As some would suggest. Rather, what we are trying to do is work on methods that may actually apply directly to wild counterparts of the species that we're working with, and ultimately improve the welfare of these animals that must relocate in order to be successful. So again, I hope that that demonstrates some of those similarities. Oops. Okay, so now let's talk a bit more about the results of our efforts in the zoos and aquarium industry. So globally, obviously, we have some pretty extraordinary numbers that have been reported. And the last citation, these top two bullet points there, are from the last citation that I can find, or at least that I'm aware of a global count. And this was back from 2011. So I'm sure that we've surpassed these numbers by now, but think about that. Globally, more than 700 million people visit zoos and aquariums, and over $350 million US dollars on wildlife conservation annually is generated from these zoos and aquariums. That's pretty spectacular, right? To think about it and to be a part of that. So when you think you're not a part of wildlife conservation, au contraire, mon frère, right? That's my horrible French. Sorry, Tatiana. So anyways, if we look at ZAA, you can see there on the right-hand side that that photo is actually the page from our 2024 annual report that Tatiana put together for us. And what you see there is that, just in last year, just in 2024, we were able to support 12 animal management plans. And we've now increased that to the number of 12. We had support through our membership dues that support those plans. We have NGOs that receive donations from ZAA directly via our membership. We also had 21,000 in member donations that went out in conservation initiative grants. So we're doing some pretty spectacular work, even though we are a small organization, but we're growing. And I think we're going to just continue to do more and more and more. So if you look at us from a whole, by the way, we celebrate 20 years this year. Our organization over the last 20 years has surpassed the $4 million mark in donations to conservation. And I think that's pretty spectacular to think about. And I know that if you're listening here and you're not a ZA member, the organizations that you're a part of, I'm sure are, again, making up that $350 million on wildlife conservation annually. We can also think about the fact that we not only support through monetary donations, but we have some amazing native breeding and reintroduction projects, thinking about direct connections between Ex-Situ and In-Situ, that would be one of them, right? Thinking about a lot of the amphibian projects. We also see some mammal release. We think about, the black-footed ferret is the one that most people refer to when we think about mammal releases and reintroductions. We can also think about rare species. So occasionally we have the ability to have such a rare species like an aardwolf present in our zoos. So Zoo World Zoological Park in Panama City Beach, Florida, actually has a pair of aardwolves who just recently had pups. It's the first pups that have been born in the U.S. in over 40 years. I will tell you, I've spent a lot of time in Africa and I've yet to see an aardwolf in person until I went to Zoo World, and I was so excited to see them there. So it's pretty cool when we get to have those kinds of experiences right in our backyard, and I think take that for granted sometimes. So think about how we make a difference, how we can think about learning now from this rare species that we have in captivity in our care in Florida, and how that can potentially support In-Situ conservation efforts, right? There's a lot of work being done with aardwolves and understanding their diets and understanding how to supplement and help them when they need it. And so this is a great opportunity for us to learn. And then I want to also tell you another story, and this is to tell you a little bit story about some direct impact. And this is saving a rhino one at a time. I do want to tell you that there is a graphic photo in this slide. So Please excuse me if that somehow upsets you, but I do want to warn you that. So if you want to look away at that point, I understand. But I'd like to at least introduce you to the characters of this story. So this is Betsy Brewer Bethel. She's the director of Southwick Zoo. She's also has a nonprofit organization called Earth Limited. She's also the current chair of the ZAA Board of Directors. And next to her is Rowan. Rowan is a young man who is still in high school, and he's been a visitor of the Southwick Zoo for quite some time. And in the other picture, you'll see far off in the distance there, that's Dolly. That's not her real name, but I'm going to call her Dolly. And she is a southern white rhino that lives in Namibia. Now, Rowan actually really loves rhino. And it turns out that when Rowan was 12, he participated in a rhino encounter at Southwick Zoo. And he met Betsy during that time. And during his encounter, Rowan learned about Thelma and Louise, who are Southwick Zoo's rhinos that participate in the encounters. And Rowan really loved learning about Thelma and Louise, but also about their wild counterparts. But he was very distressed in the sense that he also learned that rhinos are often poached for their horn. And so that was part of the educational experience of the encounter. He learned about those things. And he became so in love with rhino through that encounter, through that memory, through that experience, and it created such empathy in him that he actually took it on his own to start an initiative to start collecting money for rhino conservation. And I'll just point out that you can read more about Rowan on Southwick Zoo's website if you're interested in looking at his story. Now, let's fast forward a few years. And yes, Rowan is still collecting for rhino conservation. He's still doing the work. It did change his life. I'm glad to hear he is doing so because Dolly, the rhino that Rowan had never met, needed help. And here's that graphic picture. Again, I apologize if it upsets you. Okay. A poacher attempted to actually kill Dolly for her horn. Somehow, who knows how, the attempt was not successful, but the bullet did leave obviously damage, and you can see there the bullet wound. So it went in the front of the skull and out the back. You can see the two holes there. So Dolly was in desperate need of some veterinary care, and Dolly was not doing well at this time, as you can imagine. So I was very fortunate that the veterinarians that are working in this area are, I guess I will say, extended colleagues of mine. And they reached out and said, we need some help because we don't have the funds, but we need to get some help to Dolly. And so we needed to get a veterinarian there who could help. And so I contacted Betsy, knowing about Rowan, and Rowan was then contacted, and Rowan said, absolutely, please take some of our funds, get it to them, get it to Dolly. And so I am happy to report that there is a happy ending to this story. And that is that the money that Rowan had collected here, because again of his passion for rhino, was sent to Namibia. It did actually get to the veterinarians that were working with Dolly. And yes, Dolly is going to make a full recovery. She has a long ways to go yet. She still has some wound care that is being addressed, but she is living her life now she just took a mud bath. That's the photo of her doing her mud bath. And we do have a happy ending to the story. So I just want to reiterate that it doesn't matter if we're doing it one rhino at a time or if we're doing it one wild dog pack at a time. We really need to think about how our Ex-Situ conservation is really connected to In-Situ conservation, because we need both, right? We need to be tooting our own horn, and we need to be talking about that. So here are just some quick take home messages, and then we'll open it up for if there's time or any questions. So by working in a zoo and aquarium, you are definitely working in the field of wildlife conservation. So please don't forget that. And that zoos and aquariums do matter. They make a difference. And I know we all know that, but um, I don't know that we share that well. And so we need to really start telling our story better. Don't be shy. And I have to give a plug for this. One of the ways that you can do that is apply now for a ZAA annual award in conservation. Those awards are open. They are presented at our ZAA annual conference, which is coming up in October. October 1st through 4th in San Antonio. You can get more information about that on our website. We offer both an In-Situ conservation and Ex-Situ conservation award. We would love to see us have so many awards that we want to give more than one. Okay, so please take some time, tell your story, because I know you all have a story. You all have a Rowan, or you all have Aardwolf pups, maybe not Aardwolf pups, but something similar to that that we can talk about. And we really need to do a better job of that. So that is, if nothing else, my biggest take home message. And with that, I would just like to thank you for all that you are doing to help support wildlife. Just so that you're not concerned, this is a picture of me with my namesake, which I'm so proud of. This is a now subadult southern white rhino, and I was participating in her first her first horn trim, again to help hopefully mitigate poaching. And because she was new in the system, she got to be named Kelly. So that's pretty special for me. So that is why that image exists. It's not because I'm exploiting the animal, it's because I was trying to help the animal, and they were generous enough to let me take a photo with her. She's doing well now, by the way. I have people who uh, watch out for her in the park that she lives in. And she even has a young sister now that's a part of their herd. So that's pretty cool. So with that, any questions?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kelly, for your presentation. Just a reminder, everyone, if you have a question, you can go ahead and put it in the Q&A. We do have a question, Kelly. Is there a particular method of educating the public on zoo/aquarium conservation efforts and similarities to fieldwork that you find is most effective? For example, social media, email, advertising campaigns, or other. I know you mentioned the brilliant trading cards.
Yeah, thanks for that question. Yeah, this is my age showing. I'm not a social media guru, so I apologize for that because I'm sure there is some spectacular things that you can do with sharing in social media. Um, I am kind of an old-fashioned gal, which is I like to tell a story. I like to connect people to what we're doing. And so maybe that is something that you can incorporate into, um, you know, I, I think sometimes there are, our chats or our talks can get a little stale. So we need to be careful about how we're presenting them. And again, that's why I was emphasizing, making sure that you're making a connection, um, and hoping to prompt empathy, not only for the animal that's in their presence, but beyond, right? And that's when you have an opportunity to talk about what you're doing. I really think that every talk that we give, rather that be to school kids or rather that be, to a group of older adults, I really think we need to just be talking about those similarities that we see because people romanticize what nature is. They romanticize what the wild is. They still think that there's these vast landscapes that these animals roam free in, and that's just not reality. And it's a hard reality to understand, but it's one that I think if we do a better job of helping people to connect what we do in our zoo world and aquarium world and what is the reality for most of the animals, most of the wild counterparts, I think that we can maybe do a better job with that. I'm sorry, I know that was long-winded in the sense, and I didn't really give you an answer other than I just really believe that storytelling is the way to go. And that can take lots of different forms. It could be social media, it could be trading cards, it could be all kinds of things. But
So along with that question, maybe how can education departments and the animal care team collaborate more effectively to communicate conservation goals?
yeah, I think that's a great point. And you know, we got to get out of our silos, right? And we got to make sure that we're working as a team and kind of coming back to that idea of, you know, we're all co-stars, right? And how do we get the voice of the animals out? And again, I don't mean that in an anthropomorphic way. I mean that in, you know, really trying to tell their story and being responsible for telling their story appropriately. So I think that, you know, there probably needs to be more opportunities for, and maybe that takes, you know, some type of actual facilitated workshop to connect your animal care staff and your educational staff if they are different, um, to make sure that everybody knows this, knows some of the points that I brought up about the similarities, because I can guarantee you that there are people working in our industry that have never thought about connecting the dots that way. And it's not because I'm brilliant. It's just because they've just never been faced with that challenge or with that question. And I think if we can just start doing a better job with that, um, that might be the start.
Thank you. How can zoo management better support and encourage their staff's involvement in conservation initiatives?
Yeah, well, I mean, I can't speak for, you know, all zoo managers. And you know, obviously resources are limited. We have limited resources in not only money, but also in time. You know, it really is going to, I think, drive the individuals who have the passion. And you know, oftentimes this starts with you doing things that are not necessarily in your normal job duties, right? It's asking if you can add on. And I know that seems like a crazy thought because you're already so busy if you're, you know, in the keeper world or the trainer world or whatever, even at the management level, right? We're so busy with meetings and budgets and all of these things. Uh, we just, I think, always need to remind ourselves why we do what we do, and and then try to create the avenues to make that happen. And I know that didn't really also answer your question, but I would say open up the conversation, right? If you are management and you want to see more engagement with your staff, open up the conversation. If you are staff and you want to see more engagement from your management, open up the conversation, right? And at first, it might mean that you're willing to do a little bit more to make it happen. But good things come when that happens.
Thank you. We have someone that put in the Q&A that it was Lisa. She said, we are having some of our staff use your lesson plan from Cuso to help on this front. And she included a link. So if all the attendees do want to get more information, Lisa did put the link in there for you. Kelly, at the end of your talk, you did talk about awards. So can you talk a little bit more about why maybe some conservationists don't necessarily apply for awards, or why there's some more reluctance in applying for awards and getting that recognition?
Yeah, again, I mean, I think we're so busy, especially as if you are, you know, working to start up a new initiative, you know, you're writing a grant potentially, you're doing some other things, you know, you're writing up reports, maybe even writing up, you know, publications. There's all these things that we are so busy to do, which are all very valid and worthwhile things to do. However, we need to take some time to also, again, tell our story. And sometimes telling our story is to have others help us tell our story. And that means to get some recognition for the work that you're doing. And not saying that you're doing it for the accolade, but you're doing it for obviously the conservation effort. And so why not help tell that story? And one way to do that is to be award winning, right? Why do you think movie directors put so much time and effort? Sure, it's to make money because they're in that kind of a for-profit area, but I meant, you don't think they won an Oscar? They won an Oscar, right? They want the award. So what I'm suggesting is that don't be shy. Don't think, oh, well, this is just one little project, or, you didn't save the world with your one little project. You know what? You saved a piece of the world. You saved that part of the world. Tell that story. And I think we're just so either busy or uncomfortable with sharing that kind of information that we sometimes forget to look out for things like awards. And so I want to again emphasize that we would love to have more recognition in ZAA of some of the work that's being done. You can go to our website right on the homepage. I understand there's a button for the awards. You can apply right there. It's not that difficult of an application. We would love to hear from you, so please do. There are other awards there that you can apply for as well if it's appropriate. But certainly let us help you tell the story of conservation.
Thank you. Are there any specific skills that zookeepers should develop that are transferable to in-situ conservation work?
Yeah, great question. Again, from my perspective, because I am into we need to be telling our story better. We need to be connecting people. We need to be the voice for our animals. Communication skills. We really need to think about that. Oftentimes, my previous career, I was teaching at a university, and when I would have students who wanted to go down the area of wildlife conservation, and which includes working in zoos and aquariums, I would always encourage them, get a communications minor, um, or some form of communications. Because it's very important. Oftentimes we think, oh, we're going to go work with animals because they're easier to work with than people, or we sometimes even don't like people. I've heard that before. I absolutely like people, but some people don't like people. But anyways, the point is that you're always going to be working with people. And so you need to know how to communicate and how to better, again, tell the story, tell the work that you're doing, whether that be because you need to apply for a grant, you need to apply for an award, you want to get a media burst out about your projects, whatever it might be. It might just be to telling your guests that come through your gate. Really think about your messaging and how you're presenting it. And I think that will make a huge difference.
So along with that, and along with the trading cards that you talked about earlier, if you're a zookeeper and you're trying to look for new ideas to share the conservation story of your animals, what are some options and that they can look to be able to find new ways to share that story?
Yeah. Well, I know that there are all kinds of forums, with different networking groups that exist. So certainly think about that. I guess, sometimes we get a little territorial. We don't want our idea, it's our idea, or we think it's our idea, and we're kind of leery about sharing it. But please don't. Again, remember why we're in it and why we're trying to do what we're trying to do. And uh, yeah, I say, we're a bigger community that needs to be thinking cross boundaries, and really starting to think about how we can, um, you know, uh, how we can generate these new ideas, these new exciting ideas, or maybe revisit one that has existed, and maybe we just need to, give it a new look or a new sound, and it might still be good. So I think just trying to reach out across other educators, trying to reach out across other zoos to get a feel for what they're doing, take a little time to, maybe explore some of their websites or some of their educational programs. And then maybe just connect, don't be shy. Reach out to the people, even if you don't know them, and see if you can't start up a conversation. I think that's probably the best way to do it. We, of course, have a professional development group here with ZAA. Becoming members of those organizations like ZAA are really important to kind of cross-pollinate with different ideas. And so I guess I would encourage that as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kelly.
Mhm.
Those are all the questions that we have. Let me go
Perfect.
ahead and share my screen again. So just a reminder to everyone, these are all the upcoming webinars that we have. On June 11th, we have the American Association of Zookeepers coming to speak. And on June 18th, we're going to be talking about the animal management programs and what they are and why they work. If you would like to go ahead and give us some feedback, this is a QR code you can go ahead and scan. Thank you so much again, Kelly, for coming to speak with us tonight. We really appreciate it. And I hope
Thank
everyone
you.
has a